If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, G.I. Joe is unforgettable. But the most important story this team ever had never made it to television. It's the story of how it all really began and how it all really came to an end. A story that begins with a request from President John F. Kennedy and ends decades later with a letter that had no return address. That story was finally revealed in Marvel Comics' issue number 152. A fighter jet cut across the American sky. On board was Joseph Colton, the original soldier the entire program had been named after. Not Duke, not Hawk. It was Joseph Colton. The pilot asked him when was the last time he'd ridden in the back seat of a combat jet, and Colton remembered. Vietnam, 1963. Colton was leading a Green Berets squad down to just 2 men, Top Wenzel and Angel Vasquez. The mission had fallen apart. Colton blew the enemy's ammo bunker to cover their retreat, and the 3 of them ran for the extraction point. That's when everything went wrong. A heavy machine gun nest Colton hadn't spotted took out an incoming rescue helicopter, killing the entire crew on board. Shortly after, fleeing on foot through the jungle, Angel Vasquez was hit. A second helicopter, completely blacked out, no unit markings, a spook mobile straight out of the intelligence community, showed up to pull them out. But the pilot had strict orders. Fly Colton directly to Tan Son Nhut, no detours. From there, he was to report to Washington. Colton asked to divert to the nearest base. Angel needed help immediately. The pilot refused. Orders were orders. The flight took over 2 hours. Angel Vasquez died along the way before any help could reach him. But here's the stranger detail. When the helicopter landed, Colton didn't follow protocol. He didn't hand the body over for standard processing. He voluntarily delayed his trip to Washington, personally saw to Vasquez's body, and made sure the soldier was registered with the dignity the bureaucracy had denied him. Only after that did he board his flight to the capital. In Washington, Colton got a surprise. The meeting wasn't with a general. It wasn't with an intelligence officer. It was with President John F. Kennedy himself. While he waited alone in the Oval Office, Colton noticed a small model on the desk, a replica of PT-109, the torpedo boat Kennedy had commanded in World War II, sliced in half by a Japanese destroyer in 1943. Kennedy had survived, saved his crew, spent days stranded on an island waiting for rescue. Colton realized he wasn't about to meet a man who talked about war from behind a desk. This was someone who'd been in the real chaos of combat himself. Then Kennedy walked in, apologizing for keeping Colton waiting, and immediately asked about the welfare of one of his men. Kennedy had already been briefed on what happened to Vasquez. He knew Colton had broken protocol to honor a dead man. He knew Colton had delayed a direct presidential order just to make sure a fallen soldier was treated with dignity, and he was impressed. Then Kennedy laid out the plan. A special operations force, unlike anything the U.S. military had ever created. A unit that would answer directly to the president. No middlemen, no conventional chain of command. A unit with no official face, no public record. It would go by a simple code name, G.I. Joe, a nod to the generic American soldier, the nameless face of every generation that picked up a rifle for the Republic. Kennedy offered Colton command of it, suggested he take Thanksgiving week to think it over and give his answer afterward. Then his aide stepped in. They had to go. They needed to be in Dallas by the 22nd. The 2 men shook hands. Colton promised to give the matter his utmost consideration. Back on the plane, flying over Arlington National Cemetery on the way to the airfield, Colton thought back on what Kennedy had told him about Vasquez. "I was impressed with your devotion to honor the request of a dead man. I know I can trust you to do the right thing." Colton never got the chance to give the president his answer. The comic never shows what happened next, but the real world knows. 9 days later, on November 22nd, 1963, in Dallas, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. 30 years later, the team born from that unfinished conversation would come to its own end. The same way. No answer. No ceremony. December 1994. The final issue. That morning, Wade Collins woke up in a cold sweat. It was the same recurring nightmare. Back in Vietnam, on a long-range recon patrol, walking straight into an enemy encampment with Snake Eyes, Stalker, and Storm Shadow at his side. It wasn't just a dream, it was a memory that had never left him alone. Collins's adopted son, Sean, walked into the room. Sean wanted to enlist. Collins tried to talk him out of it. Sean wouldn't listen. So Collins convinced his son to do one thing before making any decision. Write a letter to someone who actually knew what being a soldier meant. To Snake Eyes. Nobody expected Snake Eyes to write back. At the Pit 3 in Utah, Stalker showed up with the day's mail. There was no battle, no Cobra. Joe's soldiers were packing up equipment, sealing files, boxing up decades of history in cardboard crates. The program was being shut down, not by defeat on the battlefield, not by betrayal from within, but by an administrative decision, a signature on a document nobody would ever see. Stalker spotted an envelope addressed to Snake Eyes and stopped. Scarlet was stunned. Snake Eyes didn't get letters. His entire family had died in a car accident while he was on deployment. There was no one waiting for him, no one writing to him. The most iconic character in the series, the silent ninja, the face always covered. The hero who'd never needed to speak a single word through years of missions had built an entire career inside a silence that was both armor and tomb. The letter was from Sean Collins. Snake Eyes wrote back. Not about glory, not about the duty plastered on recruitment posters. Snake Eyes wrote about men from the same squad that haunted Wade Collins' recurring nightmare. Men nobody else remembered, and about himself. The first was Ramon Escobedo. Ramon re-upped and extended his own tour in Vietnam, not through some form anyone authorized, but to trigger, in practice, a Department of Defense rule. Two members of the same family couldn't serve in a war zone at the same time. As long as Ramon stayed in country, his younger brother, fresh out of basic training, already slotted for infantry, couldn't be shipped out to Vietnam. 2 weeks later, Ramon Escobedo died in the same firefight that still woke Wade Collins up at 3 in the morning. The second was Dickie Saperstein. Dickie stayed in Vietnam an extra year, taking the cash re-up bonus to pay for his father's heart surgery. His father died on the operating table before Dickie ever got the chance to go home. His mother fell apart. Dickie could have requested a compassionate discharge right then. He had every right to, but he felt like he'd made a deal and he was going to stick to it. Dickie stayed, and he died in the same firefight as Ramon, stepping on a mine while trying to flank the enemy. And there was a third story, his own. Snake Eyes wrote that, early on, he'd been caught in the blast of an exploding helicopter in the Middle East. He was badly burned, lost most of his face. He wrote about how people would fix their stare on the top button of his shirt instead of looking at where his face should have been. He wrote about the burn unit at the Army hospital, about waking up in a cold sweat every Tuesday morning, debriding day, when dead tissue was flayed off the patients. He wrote about a guy in the ward named Travis who kept begging him to smother him with a pillow. And he wrote that when he came home from these places, there was never a welcome party or a parade, just people spitting at him on the street, calling him a baby killer. 3 stories, 3 men, 3 choices that felt like the right thing to do, paid for at a price recruitment posters never show you. And that's when it became clear what the letter really was. Snake Eyes wasn't trying to talk Sean out of it. He was doing something harder, telling him the truth. Recruitment posters leave out that a soldier's pension isn't enough to survive on without government assistance, that there are no homecoming parades waiting in small towns, that decisions made in the field rarely come with a clean resolution, that there's inhumanity, that there's bureaucracy that kills, but there's also courage, compassion, honor, and dignity, and those live in the people beside you, not in official communiques. Snake Eyes didn't regret becoming a soldier because of the men he served with. The last line of the letter, and of the issue, and of the entire series, was this: bearing arms in defense of the Constitution of the United States of America is not really a profession, per se, it is a trust. As Snake Eyes finished the letter, Scarlet came to get him for the flag retirement ceremony. Hawk oversaw Stalker folding the colors in silence. Soldiers who'd spent years defending the country gave one final salute. Sean got the letter, read it, and told his father he needed to think it over carefully before making any decision. Sean's mother looked at the envelope. There was no return address. The final image of the series is the empty Pit 3. A sign at the entrance. Deactivated United States military base. No trespassing. Cobra doesn't appear even once in the final issue of G.I. Joe. Larry Hama titled issue number 152 with a line from Douglas MacArthur: "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away." It was a 30th anniversary issue, 1964 to 1994. If this video made you see a story you thought you already knew in a different light, share it with someone who grew up watching G.I. Joe. And if you want to know the dark origin of another 80s classic that TV kept hidden, subscribe to the channel, because the next video is about a character who seemed harmless, but had a deeply disturbing past. See you then.